right, welcome into the DAV Podcast, episode number 1, A Live Day. It is our first podcast in what we hope to be a new series. I'm Dan Claskins here along with Ashley Burns. We'll be your tour guides around DAV, helping you learn a little bit more about our mission. And we're going to talk to a lot of interesting people, to say the least, over the coming episodes. And Ashley, I know like me, you're excited here. We've got something new at DAV, a new way for people to follow our mission.
Yeah, super excited about this. This is something we've had in the works for quite some time. And, to finally get it kind of across the finish line, we're very excited for this initial podcast. We've got our DAV magazine, we've got our website, we've got social media, we've got so many ways to reach people with our information. But this is just one more platform that we're able to push that information out and hopefully reach people who need to hear it.
Yeah. And for folks that never have heard of DAV, which, hopefully if they found us on the podcast, they're a little bit familiar with us, but we understand a lot of new folks coming to DAV for the first time, not really knowing a lot about us. Let's tell folks how DAV helps veterans and the importance of DAV in the world of, really taking care of our veterans and making sure that they get all the benefits that they've earned.
Sure. So DAV, Disabled American Veterans, we've been around for almost 100 years serving veterans, all at no cost. We provide a number of services and programs to veterans and their families, which includes, like I said, no-cost help with filing disability claims or really any federal or state benefits that are available to veterans that they've earned. So that could be, like I said, disability benefits. It could be education benefits. It could be housing benefits. So really things that are very valuable and important to veterans. But we also have recently started, and I say recently, within the last few years, we've started helping veterans and spouses through our national employment program, finding high quality jobs, things that are able to help them kind of, once they get out of the military, set up that successful life that we know is one of the most important things to veterans when they get out of the military, is finding quality employment and being able to support themselves, support their families. And we also have our voluntary services program, which it serves veterans throughout the country. It allows people, veterans and non-veterans alike, to give back to the veteran community and really be a part of thanking veterans for all that they've done. And we can probably talk about that later in our podcast. I don't want to give everything away, but it's really a great opportunity for people to give
No
back.
doubt about it. DAV.org, that's our website. You can go there if you're a veteran and need some help, want to get some help with your benefits, a lot of these other services that Ashley speaks of. As also, you want to help us help veterans, you can go there as well. It doesn't really do anything without the generous support of its supporters. And we do help over 1 million veterans every single year in life-changing ways. And the purpose of this podcast really is to bring that story to life a little bit. We hope to introduce you to some veterans that DAV's had a large impact on, as well as some of our DAV stakeholders. And Ashley and I, as I said, will serve as your tour guides. Now, just to give you a little background info on us, I'm one of the many people on the team behind the scenes here at DAV. I work more on the marketing side. I am not a veteran myself, but I do come from a long history of family of veterans. My family's been serving the nation since all the way back dating to World War I and every major conflict since then. So it means a lot to me to be part of DAV. My godfather, the guy I was named after, my great uncle, Daniel Bud Knox, private first class U.S. Marines. Actually, I always say the first recorded interview I ever did was back in 6th grade. Me and Uncle Bud sitting down there with my tape recorder and cassette with my little microphone plugged out of it. And to this day, I just love the fact of what he felt about his country and what it instilled in me. And now you yourself, you did serve as a Marine veteran. Talk a little bit about that experience and what your role is here with DAV.
I am a Marine Corps veteran. Actually, what I did in the military was not too dissimilar from what I'm sitting here doing now. I was a broadcaster. So pretty much all that this encompasses, working with the media, working with video and things like that. So, I was fortunate enough to serve for 8 years. I served in Afghanistan. And when I got out, honestly, I had no idea what DAV was. Like many, many people that are getting out really had no clue, and was lucky enough to be connected to who is now my boss, Dan Clare, who's another Marine Corps veteran. And he kind of gave me an idea of what they do, kind of filled me in about everything, all the services that DAV provides. And I thought, hey, this is a pretty good group. I think that, this is something I'd like to be involved with, and did a little bit of work with them.
Wow.
8 years later, almost, here I am.
Time
now.
flies while you're having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're definitely fortunate to have your perspective here. 8 years with DAV, you've seen it do a lot of cool things. And in this episode, we're going to hit on a few of those things. We've got a full episode for you here, including You guys remember Gary Sinise from Forrest Gump as Lieutenant Dan. We know him in the veterans community as a strong supporter of veterans, and our own Mary Deaver talked with him a little bit. We're going to hear about his book that just came out, Grateful American, A Journey from Self to Service. You heard Ashley also hit on our voluntary services department, and we've got our National Voluntary Service Director. He'll join us to talk a little bit about the importance of volunteering and DAV's transportation network, how we get veterans to their appointments. But our first guest here, a very, very special guest, and we're going to get into a live day, something that's pretty interesting concept that we're featuring this year here at DAV, marking the 50th Alive Day anniversaries, and Army and Vietnam veteran and longtime DAV member Jim Sursley is going to be up here. And actually, I know you've known Jim for some time, and this Alive Day feature that we've already started here with the magazine in January and what's coming ahead this year, very interesting. Tell our listeners a little bit about what's coming up there, and for those that may not know what Alive Day even means.
Right. So for those who aren't familiar, Alive Day within the veteran community, it really is a significant marker in a veteran's life. So we're talking about people who have had traumatic experiences, people who have literally been on the brink of death. You know, you can most visibly think of a combat veteran, somebody who, say in Vietnam or Afghanistan, maybe stepped on a landmine, something like that, really to the point where they're lying there being medically evacuated, thinking that they're not going to make it, that, whatever traumatic experiences have happened, that's it. And it's almost like a second birthday. And, as you mentioned, this is a series that we're going to have in our DAV magazine this year. The gentleman that we're going to be speaking here with in a little bit, Jim Sursley, is on the cover of our January edition. And later on in the May-June edition, we actually talked to a veteran named Jim Mayer, who is, interestingly enough, he's the veteran who's credited with the genesis of Alive Day. He's the one who kind of marked that as what it is now, and has invited many veterans to come celebrate that moment with him every year. So he's the man to credit with coining the term Alive Day. But backing up to Army veteran Jim Sursley, yes, he's been heavily involved with DAV. He's one of our past national commanders, Vietnam veteran who, at the height of the war, he was serving in 1969 and had a very serious injury, as I was alluding to, a life-changing, life-threatening injury. We're able to kind of explore 50 years later what that means to him and the significance of that day 50 years later. So I'm going to go ahead and pass that over to them. But Dan Clare sitting down with Jim Sursley.
How did you feel about your mission? How did you feel about being in Vietnam?
While in country, I felt great about being there. I mean, I truly thought we were doing the right thing, and I believed in the philosophy that, communism was trying to spread throughout the entire world, and we were doing our part to save the South Vietnamese people from being overtaken by the North, who were communist at the time.
What kind of experiences were soldiers having during that contact?
Well, you mean in regular combat situations?
Yes.
Well, I mean a multitude of things, and I will be the first one to say that if someone shies away from combat, I would never use the word coward about anybody, because until you've actually faced that situation, you'll never know how you might react. And maybe everybody doesn't react in a John Wayne style, but they're certainly there in their supportive role. And that's all that we ever ask of anybody. But it was extremely difficult for a lot of young people who were anywhere from 18 to 21 or 22 years of age. It was a real test for them that I'm sure they never thought they'd have to face in their life. On January 11th, 1969, while on a combat mission, we were setting up for a night logger position. And while I was checking the perimeter to make sure that all of our claymores and everything were in place for the night, I stepped on a landmine, which resulted in the amputation of both of my legs and my left arm.
How do you survive losing two legs and an arm?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think that's probably a miracle. I think something that can traumatically amputate those three limbs and keep you alive at the same time. That landmine actually went up in a gigantic ball of flame, and it partially or completely cauterized some of my arteries to keep me from bleeding to death, and then the medic took care of the rest of it. So fortunate to have a very experienced medic, and truly a miracle to be alive with a cauterization process.
What do you remember from the blast, the last moments before everything changed?
I was on my way to, again, just coming off the perimeter to get back to my track, and that's where I stepped on it. So I don't remember the actual blast itself. I remember going up in the air, coming back down, laying flat on my back, and I remember reaching down with my only arm I had left, my good right hand, and I touched what would be like mid-thigh on my right leg, which kind of gave me a feeling that I was probably okay and still intact. I had absolutely no idea what I'd lost for limbs at that point.
What was the experience like for your fellow soldiers, do you think?
I think that's a very scary experience for a great number of them. For the ones that knew me for that entire 10 and a half months, or certainly a large part of it, I think they felt like they lost one of their leaders and just a great comrade to be around. That's the way we felt about each other. And I think for the other ones who maybe were not as seasoned as the rest of us that were there, that's a real scary and traumatic experience for them to look at someone on the ground, bleeding with the loss of 3 different limbs and going, there go, by the grace of God could be me. That they could experience that at some point in time during their tour as well, too.
Tell me, what was next? So you get blown up. When does the memory start again?
Well, when I woke up in Japan, which was like 3 days after the actual injury, was conscious briefly there. And then I went through about 12 major operations at that hospital. About 30 days after my actual injury is when I knew they allowed me to regain consciousness. They started feeding me whole food, getting ready for me to take the flight back to the States. And that's when I truly could actually look with my own eyes at what I was missing or what I had left. So like 30 days after my injuries when I totally and completely realized what I'd lost.
And where were you at? Where were you at mentally, emotionally?
Thankful to be alive, but I think you're in a real state of shock as to what you're going to do with the rest of your life. Because it's not like you had anyone else you could emulate that you remembered in high school or as a child that was running around in a wheelchair. People didn't do that in the 50s and 60s. There was not wheelchair accessible buildings or curb cuts. So those kinds of people then stayed home. So the thought that, is that going to be what the rest of my life will be like? And if I live another 30 or 40 or 50 years, that didn't look very promising.
Sent back home eventually?
Did another 9 months at Fitzsimmons in Aurora, Colorado, doing rehab, working with prosthetic arm, prosthetic legs, wheelchair adaptation, all the things, trying to be able to get around on your own. And then went home in November of 1969 for good, discharged from the military at that point.
You were separated from your fellow soldiers, but reunited with your family. Tell me about that.
Well, that's a great feeling as well, too, because I think your whole idea at some point in time during all of this challenging experience is to go home. I think there's a wholesome, fresh restart, people you can depend on and people that love you and you love them. That's where you want to be when you actually kick off what's going to happen to you for the rest of your life. And I was blessed to have a family that was extremely supportive and a community that was as well, too.
You've seen now how veterans are treated from the current wars, from the post 9/11 veterans. How do you think the treatment was different for you and your fellow soldiers than it is now?
Well, I'm sure from a medical point of view, there's been a vast number of improvements. So just the medical part, a great deal different. Prosthetics have gotten to be much better than they were back then. But I think the number one thing is the country has supported our Iraq and Afghanistan veterans beyond a shadow of a doubt, way above the way they lacked the support during the Vietnam era. I personally never experienced any bad vibrations from any members of the public, but certainly some of my fellow veterans did.
You've dealt with some of the younger guys, mentored some of the younger guys and gals who've come home. How do you think that their perspectives might be different from Vietnam era veterans?
Well, I think most of them were volunteers, for one thing, and I think that certainly puts you in a different category. I was a volunteer as well, too, and that's probably part of a blessing to my recovery. I truly believe that. But I think, again, that the fact that the public supports them, that the medical community supports them, the prosthetic community supports them, I think there's just so many more things available to progress them along to adaptation of multiple amputee veterans coming back, that it's just a little bit simpler now to assimilate yourself back into society.
So the journey back to normal, whatever normal is going to be after an injury like that, involves being able to take care of yourself, being able to be as independent as possible. How did you do that?
Well, I look back and I sort of say it's almost like a 5-year process. I feel like almost every day for 5 years, I learned something else I could do by figuring it out, trying it and it didn't work, going another direction, it didn't work, finally hitting on something that did work for you to be able to deal with all the little intricacies of day-to-day living, whether it be raising the kids or going to school or just being a husband and a father. I think you have to be willing to run into those walls that stop you, so you realize you've got to just step back, figure out a different way how to do it, and come around to the right or come around to the left. I'm kind of one of those people that's never been willing to take no for an answer. I mean, no to me just means I don't understand. Please explain more. It doesn't mean, no, you can't do that. And sometimes that gets me in a little bit of trouble because I'm overly aggressive in that way. But I think it's enhanced my life tremendously and allowed me to push forward in spite of my injuries.
Were you like that before, or do you think you became more like that?
I think I was like that before, but I certainly became more like that. Because when I recognized if I wasn't that way, life was not going to be as fulfilling as it could possibly be. And I didn't want to miss one single opportunity to do something where I could enjoy life after what I'd already been through. I wasn't interested in just sitting at home and not being involved. I wanted to be active.
Tell me about getting involved as a veteran, kind of getting back involved in service.
Well, and really all of that started way back in Minnesota, because I joined the DAV in late 1970 with a formulation of a brand new chapter in Rochester, Minnesota. And it was a fellow Vietnam veteran who'd been in country a couple of years before me that was heavily involved and invited me to a meeting. And I mean, I think it didn't take, I looked at it as probably an opportunity to socialize with other veterans, probably more like some of the other service organizations, but not having any knowledge of the DAV, I didn't know what they were doing. So went to the meetings, got involved as much as I could there in Rochester. And it wasn't long after that, though, that I made the move to move to Florida. So got down there in March of 1971, and my wife actually said to me, do you need to transfer your membership in the DAV, or how does that work? And I had not really even given it any thought. We looked it up, found Seminole Chapter 30 in Sanford, Florida, immediately transferred my membership into Chapter 30, went to my first meeting about 60 days after I got in Florida, and you can imagine, went in the front door of the hall on meeting night, and I mean, you could have heard a pin drop. There's a lot of disabled veterans, but there's not a lot of disabled veterans that look like Jim Sursley. The visual of someone missing 2 legs and an arm, they had never had anybody in their chapter that way. Neither had the chapter in Rochester, Minnesota. But I continued to go to the meetings, stayed involved as much as I could, was going to school for a couple of years during that period of time at Seminole Community College. And so there's times I could be there and times I could not be there. But whenever I could, I continued to go. I enjoyed the relationship with other disabled veterans. We shared that same camaraderie of having been in the military, now having to deal with some form of a disability that maybe the public won't understand, but certainly other disabled veterans understood each other when we communicated our difficulties. So that was another huge growth and uplifting for me to have that opportunity to have fellow disabled veterans to share my life with.
What are you proud about of the work that you've done with DAV?
Well, I mean, in reality, I think there's a lot of different things, but I think first and foremost, to have been someone that could engage every single member one-on-one and make them feel comfortable and welcome in their role in the DAV, no matter what experience they're having, no matter what their injury is. You're an important part of our organization. You're just as important as I am as the national commander, because we all have a certain role to play.
What about issues you've been involved with?
Well, a lot of different things over that period of time. I mean, now almost 20 years involvement with on the national level, to be able to participate in Washington, D.C., to work on legislative issues that are extremely important to every single member. And hopefully, again, I think you have to use what you have in this appearance of missing 2 legs and an arm, and using it to get legislation passed is extremely important, and I enjoy the opportunity to do that.
What are you proud about that the DAV does?
Well, I'm proud of everything that the DAV does, not only from chapter involvement to department involvement to issues that the national organization works on. Our volunteer programs, where we have volunteers at VA hospitals and CBOCs around the country. We have a national transportation program providing transportation to and from medical appointments for veterans that can't get there. Women veterans issues. I mean, I could go on and on for hours about what we've done, what we're working on. But I think just that initiative that the DAV takes to look at every single aspect of veterans' lives and say, what can we do to help make that better? We want to work on that. That's the issues that we want to work on first and foremost. And I think DAV has done a greater job on that than any other veteran service organization that I'm familiar with.
Jim, you do a lot of mentoring. You go out to Boulder Crest, and you deal with some veterans who have, some severe trauma in front of them. What is it that you try to pass along? What do you want people to know and understand that might make their lives different?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I notice when I've mentored at those programs is that most of the young men and women who've been there feel like society doesn't acknowledge them for their contribution. I think even though they felt like they were in a good place when they were in the military, now that they're out, I think they struggle with that existence. So what I try to pass on to them is, don't let any comment or any press that you might have seen get in the way of you being everything you can possibly be. You just have to press on and be persistent in spite of any of those struggles. And again, Boulder Crest is going to be there for you, and DAV is happy to play a part in that. And the DAV itself is going to be there for you. Get involved. Don't worry about so much about maybe what society is doing to you. Let's get you involved, and let's figure out what you can do to deliver something to help society and your fellow disabled veterans. I think that involvement on my part is the biggest thing in my life that has enriched my life tremendously. Thousands of things have, but nothing more than me being able to communicate on a daily basis with my fellow disabled veterans and make a difference in their life.
Jim, thanks for making a difference. Anything else you want to talk about?
I think that's probably it for today. I appreciate the opportunity to do this, and I certainly hope that everybody that's out there who's eligible to be a member of the DAV, let's get you involved, let's get you a volunteer, join up, become a member. We need you in the DAV.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for your time. And Jim Sursley, ladies and gentlemen, celebrating 50 years since his alive date.
So up next on the DAV podcast, we've got Air Force veteran Mary Deaver speaking with longtime DAV friend Gary Sinise. And he's talking about his new book, Grateful American, A Journey from Self to Service. So over the last few decades, he's going to be talking about how he's devoted himself to a lifetime of service to our nation's veterans.
it all accumulates. It's called a journey from self to service for a reason. And that's what I realized the book was about. It was, because I didn't know what it was going to be called in the beginning. I didn't start out, okay, I'm going to write a book called Grateful American. But I am a grateful American for so many reasons. And a big reason is because I value my freedom. And I know it has to be provided and protected. And I've met great, great heroes in my life who have devoted their lives to service and inspired me. And if I could share some of that journey with people and have it motivate them and inspire them to service in a way, then maybe I'll have done some good here.
You've been a supporter of DAV since 1994, also a big year for your acting. What is it about the organization and our members that inspires you to continue your tireless work on behalf of veterans?
Oh, gosh, I've met so many great Americans through the DAV, and I've been a part of the convention now every year for I don't know how many years, just a dozen years or more. Supported them in different ways since first engaging in 1994, but it was. And a little bit here and there from '94 to 2001, but it was after September 11th, and when I started really pouring my energy into supporting many different veterans organizations, that I really jumped in full force with the DAV after that. And I've been honored and proud to support the DAV all these years. I've learned incredible things. I was national spokesperson for the American Veterans Disabled for Life Memorial. Mm-hmm. Had I not been involved with the DAV prior to that, I may not have been asked to be the national spokesperson for that. But Art Wilson asked me to come on board, and I was proud to be a part of it for 9 years, the last 9 years of the effort to build that memorial. To attend the dedication and make a speech there was a great moment. I always look forward to coming to the national convention and playing for everybody. I've met extraordinary people through the DAV. Jim Sursley is just one of the many people who I've met and befriended through the DAV. It was Jim and I went to Jim in his town of Apopka, Florida. Mm-hmm. When I was doing a concert tour in Florida, and I said, Jim, I'm going to come over. I'm going to stop on my way to wherever I was going and visit with you, because I had an idea of teaming up the DAV and some veterans like Jim who had been living with their injuries for many, many years with our younger Afghanistan and Iraq veterans, and my foundation has been focusing on, and teaming them up in a mentoring program. And we've been involved in that now for 3 or 4 years. It's a proud program of the Gary Sinise Foundation in partnership with the DAV and Boulder Crest Retreat. And we do some great things there on mentoring, bringing some of our older veterans together with some of our younger veterans. That's very positive for them. And I've been proud to support the DAV in many different ways. They've done great things for our wounded over the years, and I count that association as very, very significant in my journey to help our veterans. I do always look forward to seeing the national commanders and thanking everybody for what they do and for being a supporter of the Gary Sinise Foundation. I'm very, very grateful to the Charitable Trust, to Richard Marks and everybody at the Charitable Trust for supporting the Gary Sinise Foundation in our efforts to provide specially adapted housing for our wounded. Richard is something, he's one of the first guys I met there. He gave me my National Commanders Award in 1994. Mm-hmm. And now, we have this great support from the DAV where they're helping us to pass on that support in our home building efforts through our RISE program at the Gary Sinise Foundation. So many different things over the years. It's too hard to mention just one.
What can readers, specifically disabled veteran readers, expect from your book?
Well, I try to share stories of many people that I've met over the years who have inspired me through the challenges they faced because they were injured in service. And I do share a lot of stories in the book with different, wounded service members that I've met, either just met or supported in some way or befriended, guys that are ambassadors for my foundation. So I try to tell stories to share some of the things that I've done and some of the people that I've met who have inspired me in the book. And you do meet a lot of different folks because I've been to the hospital multiple times. I've obviously met many wounded service members through the DAV, and we've worked with countless numbers of wounded over the years through my various efforts with other military charities and then through the Gary Sinise Foundation. So there's, I try to tell the inspirational stories of the people I've met who've been injured in battle and who have overcome those injuries and moved on.
Is there anything else that you would like to say to our membership?
No, I'm just always have always been honored and privileged to support the DAV and to meet so many extraordinary heroes who have sacrificed so much for us. I never take it for granted for 1 second. I want them to always know that their sacrifices do not go unnoticed or unremembered. I thank God every day for the men and women who serve our country, and I'll always try to do a little more to make sure that they know they got a grateful American here for what they do for our country.
All right. Thank you, Mary. Great stuff there. Always like hearing from Gary Sinise. Be sure to check out his new book, Grateful American, A Journey from Self to Service. A must read for all those in the veteran community. And up next on the podcast, we are going to go inside DAV a little bit, talk to one of our department heads. It's our National Voluntary Service Director, John Kleindienst. He sat down with Dan Clare to talk about the importance of volunteering and DAV's transportation network.
This is Dan Clare, and I'm here with John Kleindienst. We're going to talk today about the transportation network for DAV. There are so many great things going on today that weren't available for veterans when they returned from Vietnam. So many programs, so many different charities offering so many different things. But I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out that volunteerism for veterans is actually on a decline. Not as many people are getting out there and really helping out. John, tell us, as a veteran yourself, what do you think is the reason that there's this kind of ebb?
Well, my personal belief is that individuals or veterans in general feel that volunteerism comes with an everyday commitment, and I want to break down that barrier misnomer. I think it's important for people, if they're willing to volunteer their time, they consider giving 1 day a month. That's a small commitment to make, but it makes a huge difference in those who've sacrificed so much for our country.
Well, why do you think? I mean, I know that we've kind of bridged that gap. We had the World War II veterans, and now we have the baby boomers kind of coming on. Well, why do you suppose that volunteerism is kind of just static?
Well, I think people are working longer into their careers out of fear of not having enough for retirement, or if they retire, they're afraid they're going to have nothing to do. And that's, again, another misnomer. Get somebody to volunteer 1 day a month, come back and give back to the men and women who've given so much for this great country.
And one of the big programs that you can help out with, and one of the most substantive things you can do for a veteran, is help them get to the health care they earned, right?
Absolutely. It's very simple. If you want to become a volunteer driver, you got to be able to pass a physical, have a driver's license, possess good insurance, and have an interest. Look at your local VA medical facility, talk to a DAV hospital service coordinator, and consider giving that 1 day a month.
Is it tough to get into that system?
It can be, but if you're very adamant and you talk to them and there's a huge need across the country. So we're working very diligently with VA Central Office and encouraging people to expedite the onboarding process so we don't discourage folks from volunteering their time.
Well, why do people, I mean, when you're talking to volunteers who have helped veterans through help them get to and from their appointments. Some of these folks they're volunteering almost as much as a full-time job, and some, like you said, could be volunteering much less. What brings them back day after day to do that?
Not knowing who they're going to pick up. A lot of these drivers are transporting former prisoners of war, people who have a great story, or, they feel the need to give back because they themselves didn't serve their country because of a medical condition or something precluded them from doing that. So their driving is their sense of service.
Are there places, do you think, where the need's greater than other places?
Oh, absolutely. Everywhere you go, there's a greater need. You get into more rural states like Montana or New Mexico or Arizona. There's a great need in those local areas that the hospitals are located: Tucson, Phoenix, or Billings, something like that. Okay,
so if you want to get involved with the Voluntary Services Department's Transportation Network, John, what do I need to do?
You can email us at vavs.dav.org or contact our office at 859-442-3100.
That's easy enough. Thanks, John. Ladies and gentlemen, please get involved. This is a program. If those veterans don't get this transportation, they're not going to get the care that they earned, right?
Absolutely. It's important that you consider donating that one day a month.
So get involved. Visit DAV.org and give us a call if you want to get involved. Thanks.
Definitely some great stuff there about our voluntary service department and specifically DAV's Transportation Network with Dan and John and Ashley. I can't believe our first episode already in the books. That was a lot of fun.
There we are in the can, just like that.
Man, we'll hopefully continue to keep tweaking things, get a little better for you. Remember, DAV.org/podcast. That's where you can get all the latest podcasts there. DAV.org, the place to go if you're a veteran looking for some help. If you like us to help veterans, you can do it there as well. And as we get up and going, we'll definitely get out there in some of your podcast engines, the iTunes, the Google Plays, Spotify, much more. So stay tuned on all that. In our next episode, we've got a lot of interesting topics over these next couple of episodes to dip into. And a topic that's pretty hot right now in the veterans community is the blue water stuff going on.
Yeah, so there's actually some kind of exciting new developments that could have some major implications for Blue Water Navy veterans. So we'll definitely touch on that next time and kind of keep everybody up to date with the latest information that we have.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. We're going to hear from some more of our service directors, including Jeff Hall. He's our National Employment Director here at DAV. Some interesting tips for veterans looking to improve their career and how they can get involved there and much more. We're looking forward to being with you. We thank you for spending some time with us today, and for Ashley Burns and all of us here at DAV. I'm Dan Klaskins. We'll see you next time right here on the DAV Podcast.